Today, you're going to meet Ariana's incredible NDE. She had complications during childbirth and could see two dimensions, one very bad and one very good. She also transformed her life after her experience. Let's hear her story. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to help us post stories like this. Hello, my name is Ariana. I'm 40 years old, and I'm an organizational psychologist specializing in cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm Peruvian, born in Ecuador, but I've been living in Peru for many years, almost all my life. My journey has been quite intense. I grew up in a very devout Catholic family with faithful parents and an older sister. Our routine included praying the rosary, attending Mass, and sharing moments of faith together. My childhood was filled with happy memories, always doing activities as a family and having a perfect relationship with my parents. Everything was peaceful and permeated with faith in God. As I grew up and entered adolescence, around 11, 12, and 13 years old, I studied at a secular school where we practically received no religious teachings, so all my faith came from the family environment. I had a group of friends with whom I often went to parties and experienced our first passions, as is common in adolescence. I was a curious girl, eager to discover the world and experience new things. I was always sociable, open, and friendly, enjoying meeting people and experiencing different things. For example, my group of friends already attended parties at 13 and 14 years old, experimenting with alcohol as part of the typical teenage experience. Gradually, I became more focused on this aspect of social life and my friends. At that age, my world was my friends, outings, and parties. My mother noticed my curiosity and awakening to experience the forbidden and tried to establish specific boundaries for me to take care of myself, so I wouldn't grow up so fast. However, since we had very similar and strong personalities, we started to clash. I remember that after I turned 14, I started to distance myself from her. My mother was quite strict and didn't allow me to do many things my friends were already doing at that time. Back then, I didn't understand that in adolescence, we just want to be free and do what we want. I distanced myself from her, cut off many conversations, and wouldn't let her say almost anything to me. I was convinced that I needed to do what I wanted, and no one could limit me. I finished high school and entered university to study psychology. I always knew I wanted to be a psychologist and was already in college when my eyes opened to other realities. I studied at the Catholic University, an institution with various careers and people from different backgrounds. It was in this environment that I began to encounter other ideas, completely different from what I learned at home. It was also during this time that I started relationships with men, but they were always short-lived and unsuccessful. Whenever I broke up with a partner, I felt that it wasn't for me, that I wasn't destined to have a lasting relationship. I believed there was no right person for me and failed to analyze my choices. Little by little, I became colder and more complex, deciding to simply have fun and not worry about finding a partner. I thought life was meant to be enjoyed and for us to have fun. That's what I believed, and that's what I did. So, from Monday to Friday, I devoted myself a lot to work, while on Saturdays and Sundays, I had fun, going out to dance, attending parties and clubs, filling my schedule with various activities. I remember going to the gym with friends and business trips. I always had a constant desire to travel and go out. I didn't like staying at home because loneliness and silence seemed uncomfortable to me. I wasn't someone who appreciated solitude or silence because I preferred to have some noise around me so I wouldn't have to think. I didn't feel comfortable with introspection, revisiting my thoughts and feelings, despite being a psychologist, because facing myself and my life was something I avoided. Over the years, I advanced in my career and started working in human resources, getting better jobs and making more money. I started to achieve everything we're usually told to seek: a good salary, a good company, many friends, recognition at work, fluency in several languages, travel, a good physical appearance. For me, being in shape and looking good was essential because I believe that if you look good on the outside, it doesn't matter how you are on the inside. What's important is that others see you well externally. After all, that's how you earn respect. However, even with all these achievements, I felt empty and very lonely. Even surrounded by people at a bar, I felt completely alone. despite having good friends. This persistent loneliness made me question if something was wrong. I was achieving everything I was told to achieve, reaching my goals, and yet I felt empty. What was missing? So, I took more courses, more trips, wanted to get thinner, and there was always more to conquer. However, the feeling of loneliness, emptiness, and being lost without direction was overwhelming. I remember starting to seek alternative therapies or New Age therapies. I began practicing yoga in an attempt to clear my mind and find peace, tranquility, and joy. However, yoga didn't work for me, so I tried Reiki. I have several relatives who practice Reiki, so I started learning. However, I never felt peace with Reiki. On the contrary, I would leave the sessions feeling unconvinced that it was beneficial. I read all the self-help books and found them to have a limit, as if they were books where there was a point they couldn't go beyond. They said you have the power and divinity within you and can achieve whatever you want, but there was nothing more. Again, the same emptiness persisted in me. There was something I needed to understand, something I needed to do better. I began to seek the testimonials of other people in search of answers. I vividly remember the testimony of a former model, I think she's Colombian, named Ana Rosa Perez. She was at the height of her career as a model, already working in New York, had all the money, but felt empty. Everyone wanted to be with her, but her experience resonated powerfully with me. Slowly, I tried to approach God again. However, it was an uncomfortable journey for me. I didn't want to pray or anything like that. It seemed like people had nothing else to do, while I had much more important things to occupy my time, like the material world, travel, parties, friends, etc. Many years passed before I finally went to therapy. I opted for therapy with a medicinal plant, very common here in Peru. It's a hallucinogenic plant, where you ingest the extract and enter into a state of ecstasy that lasts all night. I did 2 sessions with this plant, and I remember they were intense experiences. During the sessions, I hallucinated and saw things that were supposedly from past lives and so on. There was a person like a shaman accompanying us in the session, also ingesting the plant. At one point, I said I didn't want to continue, and she simply brought me out of the trance. At that moment, I didn't understand the meaning and the dangers of this type of therapy. What I was looking for was to feel good, to find peace, but I didn't find that. On the contrary, after the sessions, I returned home and began to feel very afraid. I felt like I was being followed, that there was always something by my side, but I couldn't explain. It was as if there was a presence. I saw shadows at night, felt like something was watching me, and couldn't sleep. I began taking sleeping pills, and panic attacks started. I felt so sick that I went to my father. At the time, at 28 years old, I went to him and confessed that I was feeling terrible after all these experiences. My father, a man of great faith, just listened to me and told me that he was currently consecrating himself to Jesus. He suggested that I prepare myself to consecrate together with him for 33 days. At the time, I didn't understand much about this blessing, but I embarked on the journey with him. We dedicated ourselves together, and gradually, I began to feel as if there was a light at the end of the tunnel, a hope amidst my situation. A few years passed, and I was with another partner, we lived together, and I got pregnant. I didn't plan to get married. I had no intention of tying myself to anyone, but life had other plans for me. I had never had long-term relationships, but deep down, I desired a life partner. I decided to prepare for a natural childbirth, but at the crucial moment, an emergency cesarean section was necessary after 16 hours of labor. The entire left side of my body was swollen, from my leg to my arm, as if I had been inflated. After some tests, I was informed that a bacterium had entered during the cesarean section, an extremely aggressive bacterium. That night, I was informed that I would need an emergency operation due to septicemia, a widespread infection. At that moment, I was confused, but aware that surgery was necessary. We were in the clinic around 11 p.m. when a priest entered with a smile. He came to offer the sacraments and confess me, saying that the situation was serious, but I would be fine. It was at that moment that I realized the seriousness of the situation and accepted, resigned, that God's will be done. I entered the operating room with my newborn. and I remember seeing my mother crying as I was prepared for surgery. During the surgery, they discovered that my vital organs were infected and full of pus, a serious situation that led to the decision to put me in an induced coma so that my body could react. I was in an induced coma for 2 days, and it was during this time that I had an experience that I felt was a message from God to share with the world. The first sensation was of leaving my body, as if I saw myself in bed, on the stretcher, and started to float away. I saw the doctors discussing what to do to save me. I descended to a dark and foul-smelling place, a large expanse without light, full of dirt and repulsive things. There was no light, only darkness, and everything seemed chaotic. I witnessed wars, people killing each other, rivers of blood, extreme poverty, and children dying of hunger. Then, I saw all the consequences of the sin of lust, like girls being exploited as prostitutes, people sexually enslaved, and all kinds of sexual perversion. It was like watching scenes from a dark and depressing reality. At that moment, I questioned the reason for going through that and the purpose of it all. I didn't understand why I was in that horrible place. I realized that all the people involved in these acts were laughing and smiling as they did them. Where their hearts should have been, there was no light, only an abyssal night of enormous houses, like the ones we see in Hollywood nations on television, with people inside drinking and indulging in their riches. But instead of their hearts, there was darkness, no light. Finally, I witnessed everything related to the worship of the body, desperate people, men and women with perfect bodies, exercising and admiring themselves. But instead of their hearts, nothing was present. I was in the midst of it all, observing and thinking, why am I here? I don't want to be here. The feeling of that place was one of falseness, a great lie. Everything seemed fake, an illusion. I wanted to get out of there. I hadn't done any of that. I had been good in my life. I hadn't hurt anyone. I hadn't killed anyone. I saw a being very much like Marilyn Monroe. Yes, beautiful, a perfect woman. However, her appearance was sinister, despite her dazzling beauty. It was frightening, terrifying. When she approached, she said she could give me everything I wanted and that I should worship her. I replied that I knew who she was and that I didn't believe in her. Furthermore, she was a woman, and I felt no attraction to her. She said not to worry, as she could transform into a very handsome man of the type I liked. At that moment, a tremendous spiritual battle began between my soul and this being. It was a being that knew me perfectly, knew my weaknesses, and was trying to tempt me. It was like a spiritual battle that, for me, lasted centuries, but probably lasted a second in the spiritual world, where there is no time or space. It was difficult. My soul withdrew into itself. For the first time in my life, I began to cry out to God. I remember shouting, "My God, help me, please help me. Don't let me fall. Take me out of this place. I am your daughter. I love you. Please have mercy on me." It was difficult, but at some point, I felt as if a giant hand began to pull me out. It came and began to pull me out of that place, and I began to rise to leave. I could already see the place disappearing, and I was still growing. The terror, the fear, the anguish began to disappear, and I began to feel incredible peace. I remember seeing a celestial light, much stronger than the sun. In the spiritual world, all things are honest and authentic, and if I could explain it somehow, it would be as if everything we see here on earth is seen through frosted glass or dirty glass. But in the spiritual realm, everything is more precise. The sounds, the smells, the colors, everything is felt more accurately. It is a natural environment. It is the real reality. So, I saw this super bright light, and I was approaching it. I began to hear a chorus of children singing a melody. It was like the most beautiful melody I had ever heard. Again, I began to feel peace and tranquility. When I saw that celestial light, I thought I would see God. I began to feel a joy, a sensation similar to when you're at the beach and a wave comes and rolls around you, but with love. Rivers of love started pouring over me, and this love was so deep, intense, vast, and natural that it penetrated every cell of my soul, and my whole soul was filled with this love. This love continued to flow incessantly. It was a love that I never felt again in this world. It wasn't my love for my daughter, for my parents, or for anyone. It was a much stronger and purer love. So, I simply let myself be filled. I always thought only of myself, of my selfishness. I always put myself first, before others, before the common good, before what could satisfy myself. Even in the actions I performed with patients, friends, or people in need, I was always motivated by myself, to feed my ego, to satisfy my image before others, and never out of true love. At that moment, I understood that my life had been empty and that I had nothing to give back. I felt a lot of shame and sadness. I wanted to hide in the face of that burning and overwhelming love that continued to flow, and all I wanted was to remain in that state, in the place where I had always wanted to be, in the area of peace, of love, of infinite joy. But I also understood that that was not my time. I needed to go back. This was the opportunity, and I had to seize it. I remember starting to return, opening my eyes and seeing the 4 white walls of the ICU, connected to 8 machines that were monitoring my body. My body seemed inflated, swollen due to all the medications that had been administered. They had intubated me, maybe injected adrenaline into my heart. I still couldn't breathe properly. I was on oxygen, and it was a disaster. Immediately, I thought it was a dream. First, the doctor entered, then my mother, and I remember writing to her because I couldn't speak, and I told her what I had seen. I stayed another 28 days in the clinic as they continued to treat me. There were several internal cleanings. They had to fight the bacteria with large quantities of antibiotics. I felt a lot of pain, but I had never experienced so much peace and tranquility. I felt as if I had been born again, discovering everything for the first time. I was grateful to be alive, and with a peace that I had never felt before. I remember that friends would come to visit me in the clinic and say that I looked different, like another person. So, I left the clinic and saw everything with different eyes. I remembered that the first challenge was to get home with my little daughter and my partner, and I was already seeing things with different eyes. So, I started to think that I needed to make a new life. There was a strong desire in my heart to draw closer to God. So the first thing I did was go to the prayer group I used to attend and tell the priest who visited me in the hospital. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to talk. He died during the pandemic. At the time, I started praying alone for the first time, asking God to explain to me what all of this meant. During prayer, the Lord clearly said to me, "All this was a gift I gave you. It was an experience I gave you to share with the world. I want you to proclaim yourself a healthy woman, freed by your Father, God." Those were his exact words. I was healed because my body recovered from sepsis, and I was liberated because I began to free my heart. I felt a lot of hurt, a lot of sadness and pain with my mother for everything I had gone through in adolescence, for feeling that she abandoned me for many years. I drew closer to the church, to Mass, to the sacraments, and to constant prayer for the first time. It was as if I felt that, just as you need oxygen to breathe, I needed prayer to live. I wanted to pray, to be alone with myself, to pray. I no longer wanted to continue living the same life as before. Well, that's when the important challenges arose because I was still living with the father of my daughter, and I didn't want to live like that anymore. I started asking what to do in a more difficult situation. So, I talked to the father of my daughter, who is a good atheist, doesn't believe in any of this, and doesn't understand. I wanted to do the right thing and felt that I needed to make decisions. After a year of much persistence, asking God to show me things, I decided to separate. I went to live alone with my daughter. It was difficult. I had to look for work because I stopped working because of the pregnancy. I was looking for an apartment and a babysitter. I began to feel a calling to make this public now and start telling what I had seen. I understand that this was not a simple dream. Above all, my mission is to tell what I saw, that it did not come from me, but came from God, and that it can help many people reflect on what happens when we leave this earth, when we die, which is when real life begins. You need to understand that this was not God's plan for me, but that the project was much more significant and outstanding for everyone. But, above all, what changed my life more than anything else was when I experienced God's love for me. That moment when I experienced the love He has for me changed my heart. I was a very skeptical, very rational, and sensitive person, above all. But God's love, when it entered my heart, when it entered me at that moment in such an overwhelming way, was what changed everything. Because I never felt that peace, that happiness, that pure love. Understand that He loves me, not just me, but all of us. We are not here by chance. We all have a mission, and that mission is loving. Above all, we are deeply loved by our Creator, infinitely loved by Him. And knowing that God loves me so much, that He wants something better for me, wants me to be happy, whole, to help others find that, is what keeps me alive and what makes me wake up every morning wanting to continue helping more people. Second chances should be seized. I was lost for 33 years, aimless, doing nothing, because the next 33, at least, should be years when I enjoy life and do good things and bear good fruit, mainly by helping others find the way. We help patients, we pray together because some wounds are deep and sometimes therapy is the best solution. Well, that was Ariana's story, who had a confused and superficial life, but after going through all this traumatic, but also revealing and loving experience, completely changed her practices and actions. Today, she sees that her goals revolved around the material, but that there are actually much more important things than just physical and material comfort, beyond the pleasures that the world can offer us. I hope this experience has helped in some way, and if possible, please share it with those you love, so that more people can know that death is not the end, that there are many people who have been on the brink of death and have been able to experience that yes, life goes on, and that we are just going through a certain kind of learning. I'll leave it at that, and until next time,